When Lahi Jun stepped off the train in Cheyenne, Wyoming, she was tired, dusty, and full of hope. She was 56 years old, and her life in London had slowly fallen apart. She had no family left, no job, and no home. Everything she owned was inside one worn carpet bag. Inside were her sewing tools, her mother's silver thimble, fine needles, and pearl buttons passed down from her grandmother. They were all she had, along with one letter, a promise of marriage from a man named Wade Harlan, a widowed rancher, who said he wanted a strong woman to help him with his land. But the moment Lahi stepped onto the platform, that hope began to die. Wade Harlan stood in front of her, hat in hand, looking her up and down like she was something he didn't order. He didn't even say hello. Just one sentence, sharp, cold, and full of disappointment. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. "I requested a sturdy woman, someone who could handle ranch work." Lahi opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He looked at her like she was broken, like her size made her useless. She had spent her whole life working with her hands. Years as a seamstress had made them strong and steady. She'd gone through sickness, war, loss, and survived it all. But Wade didn't see that. He only saw someone too small, too old, and too thin. "I'll arrange your return passage," he added. "This won't do." He tipped his hat like a man who thought he was being polite. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that, she was alone, in a strange land, with no home, no husband, no future. She sat on a wooden bench outside the train depot for the rest of the day. The red dust blew into her eyes and her stomach twisted with hunger. She had eaten a stale biscuit on the train the day before. That was her last meal. The money she had left was only enough for tea. Maybe. She used her carpet bag as a pillow and tried to sleep. But the cold wooden bench and the sounds of cowboys and train whistles kept her awake. The next morning, the sun rose over the cattle pens. It burned hot, and the dust made everything look the color of dried blood. Lahi stood and brushed off her dress. She felt like trash thrown to the side of the road. People passed her without looking. She was invisible. That's when she saw him. A tall man stood by the cattle pen, alone. He was bigger than any man she had seen, easily 6.5 feet tall with shoulders like a barn door. His clothes were plain, his hat old and bent and his face weathered from years of sun and wind. But his movements were gentle. He guided the animals with soft words and slow steps. There was a quiet respect in the way he worked. For a moment, their eyes met. She expected him to look away, but he didn't. He just gave her a small nod and went back to work. Later that day, as the sun dropped lower, the same man walked toward her. She didn't move. She had nothing to hide anymore, nothing to lose. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "I couldn't help but notice you've been out here since yesterday. Everything all right?" His voice was deep and rough, but kind. He sounded like the land itself, dry, strong, honest. "I'm fine," Lahi lied, sitting up straight. "Just waiting for the eastbound train." The man didn't believe her. She could see it in his pale blue eyes. "I'm Boone Ellis," he said. "Most folks just call me Boone." "Lahi Jun," she replied, "formerly of London, and more recently, a mail-order bride who didn't meet specifications." He raised his eyebrows but said nothing for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Wade Harlan?" he asked. She nodded. "I saw you talking to him. Yesterday. Saw how it ended too," he said. His jaw tightened. "Wade's not a bad man, but he's got his mind set on the wrong things." Lahi looked down at her hands. They were calloused, rough from years of sewing. "He wanted a sturdy woman," she said quietly. "And I guess I wasn't enough." "You're more than enough," Boone said, his voice firm. "Size doesn't measure strength." She looked at him, confused. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. He paused. "Because someone should be." And just like that, something inside her began to shift. Not hope. Not yet. But something like the start of it. Boone Ellis led Lahi Jun to a place she never expected. It was a small wooden cabin hidden near the edge of Antelope Creek. The walk was quiet. Lahi wasn't sure if she should feel scared or safe. But something in Boone's voice, something in the way he moved slowly, gently, made her believe he meant no harm. "This is it," he said, stopping in front of the old line shack. "I built it myself years ago. It's not much, but it's dry, warm, and safe." The cabin looked forgotten. The logs were gray from wind and rain. The windows were tiny, like someone had almost forgotten to add them. But when Boone opened the door, a soft golden light spilled inside. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. There was one bed, a stone fireplace, a table, and 2 chairs. "It's perfect," Lahi whispered. Boone looked surprised. "It's been empty a long time, needs cleaning. I can bring supplies tomorrow." She turned to him. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." He paused and removed his hat. For a moment, Lahi saw something raw in his face, not pity, something deeper, something broken. "I know what it feels like," he said softly, "to have no one, to feel like you don't belong anywhere. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Lahi said nothing. She understood that feeling all too well. Over the next few days, Boone returned with bread, dry meat, soap, and blankets. Lahi cleaned the cabin, swept the dust, lit the fire, and patched a hole in the roof with canvas he had given her. She also mended Boone's shirts, carefully sewing buttons and fixing tears. In return, he brought her strong tea and small things, candles, dried flowers, sugar cubes. They sat by the fire each evening, talking. Boone spoke about the cattle, the land, his parents who died when he was 16. He had worked alone ever since. No wife, no children, just open land and long days. Lahi listened. She spoke little, but when she did, Boone listened like every word mattered. But peace never stays quiet for long. On the 5th day, Boone arrived at the cabin looking troubled. "Had visitors today," he said, hanging his hat on the wall. "Mrs. Bertie May from the church ladies group. She saw you in town last week. People are talking." Lahi's stomach sank. "What did she say?" Boone sat down slowly. "Nothing kind. She said it's improper for an unmarried woman to be staying alone with a man. She said it's scandalous." Lahi looked away. "Maybe she's right. I'm a stranger here. I have no family, no name. People will say terrible things." Boone's eyes flashed. "People said nothing when you were left sleeping at the train station. No one offered you food or a room or help. But now that you have a roof over your head, suddenly everyone cares?" She had never heard Boone raise his voice, but now he was angry. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never wanted to cause you trouble." "You didn't," he replied. "You've done nothing wrong. The problem isn't you, it's them." The next day, Boone rode out early. Lahi stayed behind and cleaned. While putting away some papers Boone had left on the shelf, something slipped out. It was old and folded. She opened it slowly. A land deed. Her heart stopped. It wasn't just for the small cabin. It was for over 2,000 acres of land, prime ranch land, the name at the bottom, Boone Ellis. Her hands shook. Boone wasn't just a ranch hand. He owned more land than anyone she had met. She suddenly remembered how kind he had been, how simple his life seemed. Why didn't he tell her? When Boone returned that evening, she was waiting by the fireplace holding the deed. "You lied to me," she said quietly. He stopped in his tracks. "Lahi, 2,000 acres, she said. "You let me think you were just a cowboy with rough hands and a good heart. But you're one of the biggest landowners in Wyoming." Boone sat down, shoulders heavy. He looked older than before. "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't tell you everything." "Why?" she asked. "Because people see the land, the money, the name, and they stop seeing me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I trusted you. I thought we were the same, 2 people with nothing." "We are the same," he said, voice breaking. "The land, the money. It doesn't mean anything if there's no one to share it with." And in that moment, Lahi didn't know what hurt more, the lie he had kept or the truth he had spoken. The silence between Lahi and Boone stretched long that night. The cabin felt colder than usual, even with the fire burning. Lahi kept thinking about the land deed. She had trusted him, fully, with her heart, and now everything felt confusing. Boone had helped her when no one else had. He gave her safety, food, and kindness. But why had he hidden something so big? The next morning, she woke early and stepped outside. The sky was heavy with gray clouds. The wind carried whispers from the creek. She needed time to think, to breathe. She walked along the bank, letting the cold water sting her fingers. Had Boone lied to test her? Or had he hidden the truth because he was afraid she would treat him differently? She thought back to the way he watched her sew, how he always listened, always made sure she had what she needed. None of that felt fake, but trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. When she returned to the cabin, Boone was waiting on the porch. His hands were full, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. His eyes looked tired. "Before you say anything," he began, "I want to show you something." He unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a simple gold ring, worn smooth with time. "This was my mother's wedding ring," he said. "It's the only thing I kept when she died. I've carried it for 40 years. Never thought I'd give it to anyone." Lahi stared at the ring, her throat tight. "I'm not offering this because of gossip or pressure," Boone continued. "I'm offering it because, in these weeks, you've become the most important person in my life." He dropped to one knee. "Lahi Jun, I want to marry you. Not because I have to, but because I want to." She didn't speak. Her mind spun in circles. The man who gave her food and shelter was also one of the richest ranchers in the territory. He had hidden it all, and yet, he had never acted better than her, never asked for anything in return. Before she could answer, they heard horses outside. A man dismounted quickly. Judge Emery Jack, the territorial judge, he looked serious. "Miss Jun," he said, removing his hat, "I've come to discuss your situation." Boone stepped forward quickly. "What's this about?" "There's been talk in town," the judge said. "The church ladies are demanding action. They say an unmarried woman living here with a man is improper. If it's not resolved, the law may get involved." Lahi's heart pounded. "What kind of law?" "Charges like vagrancy," the judge said, "or moral concerns. They want this handled the proper way." Lahi said nothing. Her mouth had gone dry. After the judge left, she sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Boone stood behind her, silent. Then, slowly, she turned to him. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" she asked. He nodded. "I wanted to, but I was scared. Every time I meet someone, they look at me like I'm just a pile of land and money. I wanted someone to see the man underneath." She looked at the ring still in his hand. Her heart was full of questions, but also something softer, something stronger than doubt. The memories of their quiet meals, their long talks, the way he protected her when the world had left her behind. That had been real, hadn't it? "I don't know what's true anymore," she said softly. "Let me show you," he whispered. He took her hand and led her outside across the field up a small ridge. The wind had picked up, pulling at her coat. But then she saw it, a wooden frame, half-built, a roof in progress, the start of a house. "I started building this after you moved into the cabin," Boone said. "Not because I expected you to stay, but because I hoped." "You were building me a house?" she asked, stunned. "I was building us a future," he said, "if you'll have it." Lahi stared at the frame, then at the man beside her. Not the rich landowner, not the tall cowboy, but the man who brought her food, protected her from shame, and believed in her when no one else had. She looked back at the ring. Her voice shook. "Is this ring given with love? Not pity, not guilt. It's given with everything I have," he said. "My name, my heart, my life." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I'd start over," she whispered. "Not at this age," he smiled softly. "It's never too late for home or for love, And in that moment she believed him. The gray clouds over Antelope Creek burst 2 days later, bringing a hard spring storm. Wind howled against the cabin walls, and rain slapped the window panes like angry hands. Boone and Lahi were inside, sitting close to the fire. Between them, on a small table, rested the gold ring. Lahi's fingers brushed it again and again as if learning its shape. At last she spoke. "I will marry you, Boone Ellis," she said in a steady voice, "but only if we stand as equals. No secrets, no walls." Boone answered with a nod so deep it looked like a promise carved in stone. He slid the ring on her finger, and even the thunder outside seemed to soften for a heartbeat. The next morning, the rain stopped, but trouble did not. Wade Harlan rode up fast, splashing mud. He jumped from his horse, eyes burning. Word of the engagement had reached town, and Wade felt mocked, first for rejecting Lahi and now for losing her to the richest rancher in the territory. "You tricked me," he shouted at Lahi. "You made me look like a fool." Lahi stepped forward, small but unafraid. "You looked at me like I was livestock," she said. "You made yourself a fool." Wade's face darkened. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I want the judge to see this. She came here as my contracted bride. I paid the agency. She belongs to me, or she goes to jail for fraud." Boone moved between them, voice calm but steel hard. "We'll settle this in town," he said, "with the judge, and with truth." So they rode in silence to Cheyenne's courthouse. Townsfolk gathered, curious as crows. Mrs. Bertie May and her church friends stood in the back, eyes wide. Judge Emery Jack called order and asked for the papers. Wade waived his contract. Lahi produced nothing. She had no lawyer. No money, only her word. The judge read the contract aloud, then set it down. "Mr. Harlan," he said, "this paper promises you a willing bride. It does not promise you ownership of another human soul." Murmurs rippled through the room. Wade's mouth opened, but no sound came. The judge turned to Lahi. "Miss Jun, do you wish to marry Mr. Harlan?" "No, Your Honor," she answered clearly. "Do you wish to marry Mr. Ellis?" "Yes," she said, voice firm. "Then the contract is void," the judge ruled. "Return passage money, Mr. Harlan, and be done." Wade staggered as if struck. He finally threw a small pouch of coins onto the table and stormed out. The sound of the door slamming echoed like a gunshot. Outside, the crowd split around him. Lahi felt dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some cruel, many astonished, but she no longer shook. She took Boone's arm, and together they walked back into the light rain. That night they married under the unfinished frame of their new house. Lanterns hung from the beams, and the wet ground smelled of pine and promise. Judge Jack returned to speak the vows. Only 5 witnesses stood nearby: Boone's 2 ranch hands, the blacksmith, the station master who had once watched Lahi sleep on a bench, and, to her surprise, Mrs. Bertie May. When the simple words were said, Boone kissed his bride with care as if sealing a fragile treasure. The lanterns flickered, and in their glow Mrs. Bertie May stepped forward. She held out a small blue ribbon. "I misjudged you," the older woman said. "Please forgive me. My mother wore this on her wedding day. I hope it brings you luck." Lahi's eyes filled with grateful tears. She tied the ribbon around her wrist, something blue at last. For a week, peace returned. Then, one dawn before the sun rose, a ranch hand burst into the cabin. "Flood!" he yelled. The creek jumped its banks. The cattle are trapped in the lower pasture. Boone and Lahi dressed in seconds and rode out. The floodwater foamed, like angry tea cutting off a group of 30 cows. They were bunched against a split-rail fence that would snap soon. If the fence broke, the animals would be swept away, and Boone could lose half his herd, the lifeblood of the ranch. Boone swung from his saddle, ready to wade in, but Lahi gripped his arm. "The water is too strong. Let me try first." Her plan was wild. She pulled a coil of waxed thread and a curved needle from her pocket, the tools that had kept her alive back in London. "I'll climb the fence and stitch the rails to the posts," she said. "Strong thread, quick knots. It may hold long enough for the water to drop." Boone stared, shocked then understood. This was her strength. Small hands, steady hands. He boosted her onto the slick fence. Rain pelted her face, but her fingers flew. She looped thread tight, as wire, tie after tie. A rail groaned. She sewed faster. Minutes later, the flood peaked, then slowly sank. The fence held. The cattle bawled but did not move. When the danger passed, Boone lifted her down. His voice broke. "You saved them. You saved everything." Wade Harlan, watching from a distance, witnessed it all. The woman he had called useless had saved 2,000 acres of fortune with a needle and thread. By noon, the sun came out. The flood turned to gentle streams that glittered in the grass. Boone brought a blanket and wrapped it around Lahi. They stood on the ridge above the valley where the house frame caught bright light. Below, ranch hands herded cattle back to safety. Beyond, the town of Cheyenne shimmered, still full of whispers. But the whispers no longer mattered. Boone pressed his forehead to hers. "You were never small," he said. "And I was never alone. Not once I found you." Lahi looked at the land, his land, now their land, and felt a fierce, surprising joy. "We're stronger together," she said. Stronger than flood, gossip, or fear. And that was the most shocking truth of all. Two souls, once broken and unwanted, had stitched a whole new world in the wide Wyoming light, thread by shining thread.